Hey, everybody. I'll be right back. Okay, it's 5:30, so let's go ahead and get started today. All right, good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing on this fine Thursday evening?
Fantastic.
Good, good. I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, it's end of the week for me, so this is my last lecture of the week. Is this the last one for you guys, or you guys still have more after this?
This is how I end my week too.
Nice, nice. Good, good. Okay. So today we're going to finish up our lecture notes on steady flow in rigid vessels. Okay. And so if you remember from Tuesday, what we did was we mostly did a review of Navier-Stokes and how you solve those kinds of problems. And what you'll see is that we'll actually take that result, even though we had to apply a ton of assumptions on it, we can actually use that result to talk about, two very important concepts in cardiovascular fluid mechanics, right? And so the first is going to be Murray's law, and we'll talk about what that means, throughout the lecture today. And then the next thing will be about wall shear stress. Okay, so I think I brought up the idea of wall shear stress maybe about a week ago, and so we'll bring it up again and kind of explain how that how that applies here, and what that says and how that relates to Murray's law. Okay, and so I don't think the lecture today will take up the entire time. And so after we're done, with the lecture, I do want to spend some time talking about your final project. Because next Thursday, we're going to have our first workshop in Vascular, which is the software that you're going to work on your final project. And so with Vascular, you'll be able to basically create a geometry based on medical images. Okay, so you're going to create like a 3D model of a person's blood vessels, and then run a CFD simulation on that, on that geometry. And so it's going to be it's quite an undertaking. Yeah, so you have to install it. And so, I'm going to walk at the end of lecture today, I'm going to walk you guys through how to download and install the software. So luckily, Vascular works on all platforms. So it works on Windows, it works on Mac. And if you have Linux, it actually works on Linux too. Actually, Linux is actually the development platform, and then it's actually ported to Windows and Mac after that. So it actually works best in Linux, but it works fine. I use it in Windows, so it works fine. And so I want to walk you guys through and how to install that. So we're going to do that at the end of class today. Okay. And I want to introduce this project to you guys early because it's going to be quite an undertaking. So there's going to be a lot of things that you have to do, because setting up a CFD simulation just by itself is already going to be really challenging. But we're going to be setting it up on a very complicated geometry of a person's blood vessels. So it's there's some added complexity there too. Okay, and so starting next Thursday, you're going to have at least the tools to do kind of the first half of the project. So it would really help to kind of start working on that early, and work through any issues or any bugs that you find, so that you're ready to go later on in the semester. Okay. Happy Lunar New Year to you too. So if you celebrate that, it's a big weekend for that. So happy Lunar New Year to all you guys too. Okay, so are there any questions before we get started today? Red envelopes. Yeah, I miss those. I'm too old for those now. All my aunts and uncles said you're a man now, so you don't get red envelopes anymore. So we only give those to the little kids. That's cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started then. Okay. All right. And so the subject for today's lecture is going to be Murray's law. Okay, and so I'll explain what that is. But before we get there, I do want to remind you of kind of two important results from the end of lecture on Tuesday. Okay, and that's our formulas for the flow in a rigid vessel. Okay. I know Elon's done a few podcasts. Is the one that he did with Joe Rogan, was that the one he got high in, or was that another one?
Super.
Okay, that's why it sounded familiar to me. Okay, maybe it'll happen again. I guess we'll see. Okay, and so our formula here for the flow rate. Remember the way that we computed it was we took the integral of our velocity, and and then we did it with respect to dA, right? Where A right here, that was our cross-sectional area. And then once we computed that, we got the following formula, right? So we got minus pi r to the fourth over 8 mu times dp dz, okay? Right? And so that's one formula for the flow rate. And so you can see it depends on r to the fourth, and also depends obviously on the pressure gradient, which is going to drive the flow, okay? And then the other formula that we got at the very end was the relationship between pressure drop and flow rate in a cylindrical vessel, okay? And so that formula was the following. So we had delta P is equal to 8 mu L all over pi r to the fourth times Q, okay? And this guy, actually, you know, we derived this guy from the upper expression just by applying by quantifying that pressure drop. And so this is important because this defines our relationship between pressure drop and flow rate in a cylindrical vessel. Okay. And so these two formulas are going to show up again, you know, a couple of times today. So I want to kind of make sure that you guys, you know, we kind of are reminded of it. Okay. All right. So now that we kind of remind ourselves on kind of, you know, the more important results, let's actually apply this to blood flow and to say something, you know, important about it. Okay. And so we're going to start with Murray's law. And Murray's law, what it has to deal with is it has to deal with how vessels bifurcate. Okay. And so what do I mean by bifurcate, right? So that might be a new term. And so all that means is when I say bifurcate, that's when a vessel kind of splits off into two, okay? And so schematically it looks something like this. You might have a vessel that comes in, and then when I say it bifurcates, it splits into two branches. Okay. And so it looks something just like that. Right? So this happens a lot in your cardiovascular system because you remember what we talked about, you know, there's 60,000 miles of blood vessels inside of you, right? And so, you know, that's not just one path. And so there's multiple paths, you know, in there, right? Because you can imagine, you know, your one heart has to distribute blood to every corner of your body. And so if there's just one blood vessel that goes throughout your body, that would be really inefficient, right? And so that would be the same thing as like, you know, say you have to get somewhere in Fullerton and there's only one road in Fullerton that you can take. And so you have to drive on that one road, right? And if your destination is at the end of that road, then you're kind of screwed. You kind of have to, you know, wait in traffic all the time. And so that's why, you know, for our streets, we have them split and bifurcate, right? And so for blood vessels, it's the same thing. So it's kind of to optimize the amount of, you know, work that's done, okay? But this is a problem here, right? Because remember, you know, everything that we went through on Tuesday with Navier-Stokes and all that, we assumed we only had one blood vessel, right? We had one blood vessel, it had a constant radius, and it didn't split at all. And so, you know, as soon as we throw in a bifurcation like this, this really complicates our flow field where it makes it difficult to use Navier-Stokes, right? But, you know, we can still use some of the results that we came up with on Tuesday to say some important things about, you know, what happens when the blood vessel bifurcates, okay? Okay, and so let me go ahead and define some properties here. And so, you know, we're going to use terminology that, because it's a biological thing, we use biological terms. And so this, if we assume that the flow is coming in from left to right here, okay, and it splits off, we're going to call this artery on the left, we'll call this the parent artery. Okay. And then the two ones that split off, we'll call these the daughter vessels. Okay. why they're called daughter vessels and not son vessels or child vessels, I don't know. That's just kind of the terms that they gave for it. Okay. All right. And so what we're actually going to be really interested in is the size of these vessels. Okay. And so, we're going to define a radius out here. And so we're going to have a radius of the parent vessel. So we'll call that RP. Okay. And then we're also going to have radii of our two daughter vessels. Okay. Okay. And so I'll call them RD1 and RD2. Okay. All right. And so what Murray's law states is that there's actually a relationship. So there's a relationship between if your parent vessel is a certain size, then your daughter vessels have to follow some kind of relationship too. Okay. And what we'll be able to do is actually be able to find that relationship based on the results that we have right now. Okay. And the reason we have this relationship is that what that relationship is going to do is it's going to minimize the amount of work that your heart has to do, right? Because you can imagine, you have all these bifurcations, all these blood vessels happening in your body. It would be great if the geometry of the blood vessels were designed such that it optimizes the amount of energy that your heart has to output, right? Because if your heart has to work kind of extra hard because of suboptimal geometry, that's not a very good design, right? And if you think about it like this, that the human body is the result of millions and millions of years of evolution, and so it wouldn't make sense for us to have like suboptimal things like that for such an important organ in our body. Okay. Was there a question? I heard someone's mic come on for a bit. Okay. All right. And so what we'll find is that there's an optimal relationship between the radius of the parent vessel and the radius of the daughter vessels that minimizes the amount of work that the heart has to do to pump the blood. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this?
So, Professor, you said the capital R represents the radius of the vessel, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And so what we want to find optimal relationship between RP and RD, both RDs, that minimizes the amount of work needed to pump the blood. Okay. And we'll be talking about Murray's law within the context of blood flow, but as you can imagine, all the stuff that we talked about with Navier-Stokes, that applies to any fluid, right? And so, if you're designing like a branching piping system, this kind of relationship would actually be useful for there as well. Okay. Okay. And so let's talk about, what, how much or where does the energy actually go towards pumping the blood? Okay. Okay. And so in terms of that, there are kind of two competing factors that affect the radius of the blood vessel. Or in other words, there are two sources of energy sinks, that are required to move the blood. Okay. All right. And so the first one we're going to talk about has to do with viscosity. Okay. And so as the radius decreases in a vessel, or as vessel radius decreases, the amount of power that's required to pump it will go up. And the reason it goes up is because the amount of viscous forces are increasing as you decrease the radius. Okay. And so intuitively, the way that you can think of it is, say that you have a really small, tiny hole and you're trying to shove, a bunch of material in through that hole, right? And so because there's a lot of friction associated with the tiny space, as the vessel radius decreases, you're going to have an increase of power because, you're trying to squeeze the same amount of blood into a tinier space. Okay. All right. So that's the first factor. But, as the vessel radius increases, that's also going to increase the amount of power, but for a different reason. And the reason, if you increase the radius of your blood vessel, you're just increasing the amount of blood that's just there, right? And so what we can say is that the volume of blood is going to go up. Okay. And so if you just have more blood or more stuff to move, that's going to take more power just to push it around, right? And so if you compare it to, say you have to push a boulder up a hill, if you have a bigger boulder, it's going to take more work to push it up the hill, right? So it's the same thing with blood. Okay. And so we have these kind of two competing factors where, if we decrease the radius, we're going to increase the amount of power because the viscous forces increase. But if we increase the radius, then it's also going to take more work because it's just more blood, right? And so, as we change the radius, both of these guys are going to move up and down. And eventually, at a certain point, the two are there's going to be almost kind of perfect harmony between the two. And then we're going to have, kind of a sweet spot. And so Murray's law is basically finding that sweet spot, where these two things are kind of at a minimum. Okay. Okay. And so let's come up with equations that kind of characterize both of these effects right here, right? And let's do it for a single vessel. Okay. Okay. And so we're going to have a single vessel of radius R and length L. Okay. And so I'm going to use big R again for the radius. And so we're going to ignore the parent and the daughter for now. So this is just a single vessel. Okay. And the length of this vessel, we'll call it L. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. So let's start with the first power, first source of power, right? And so let's deal with viscous friction first. Okay. And so the amount of power that's going to be used to overcome viscous friction is going to be driven by pressure. Okay? And so just like before, let's say that we have a pressure drop across this vessel, and we'll call it delta P. Okay? Right? So let's work with that. Right? So pressure difference will overcome the viscous losses. Okay. Another way that you can say is that, the pressure is going to be performing the work that's needed to overcome the, the viscous friction. Okay. Okay. And so the first thing we need to compute is we need to compute, the pressure force. Okay. Okay. All right. And so to do that, we need to multiply by an area, right? Because pressure is nothing more than just force divided by area. And so if we multiply by area, then we can, get a force. Okay. And so pressure force is going to be equal to the pressure drop, delta P, multiplied by the cross-sectional area. Okay, so we're going to have delta P times A. Okay. Right. And this has units of force. And so this will be like a Newton, right? Okay. All right. And so now that we have a force, the way that we can compute power from this is we can take this force and multiply it by velocity. Okay. Right. So the symbol for power is usually, I usually use the symbol W dot. Okay. And since this is the power that's associated with overcoming friction, we'll call it W dot visc. Okay. And so we need to take our pressure force and then multiply it by the flow velocity, okay, or the velocity of blood that's going down this blood vessel. Okay? But we can't just, it's hard to pick just one velocity because the velocity is actually changing as we go across the cross section, right? And so the velocity that we're actually going to pick is going to be U bar, okay? Where this U bar here, this is a mean velocity. And so the mean velocity is just going to be the average velocity across the cross section of the face. Okay. And so if we plug in for the pressure force up here, what we get is W dot visc is equal to delta P times A times U bar. Okay. Right. And so we have this product here of A times U bar, and this is actually going to be our flow rate. Okay. Okay. Because remember, flow rate, is the amount of volume of blood that passes through a cross section, right? And so one way that we can compute that is we take the mean velocity and multiply by the area. Okay. And so from that, we get a simple formula for W dot visc is going to be delta P times Q. Okay. Right, so pretty simple. So you just find the pressure difference and you multiply by the flow rate. Okay. But right now this is not that useful because it doesn't have our radius in it, right? And ultimately we want to get a relationship with radius. And so let's plug in for delta P. Okay. And let's use the one of the formulas that we had at the beginning. Okay. And so remember from the first page, we had this formula right here for delta P. So we had delta P is equal to 8 mu L over pi r to the 4th times Q. Okay. And so let's use that formula here. And so if we plug that in, we get 8 mu L over pi r to the 4th times Q squared. Okay. Okay. And so that's the amount of work that's required, or the amount of power that's required to overcome friction. Okay. So I know I swapped the terms around here, but I did that, for a very good purpose. And the reason for that is, we want to get expressions that have both velocity, or not velocity, flow rate, okay? Because with flow rate is easy to work with because we can just apply conservation of mass, right? So the fact that we have flow rate here is going to be really useful later on, okay? And so, we have flow rate there, and we also have the radius, okay? And so we want the radius there because that's our ultimate goal, right? So that our ultimate goal is to find a relationship with between the radii, between the parent vessel and the daughters, okay? And so, it was kind of a lot of steps to get here, but I did all this so that we get an expression with both flow rate and with radius, and that's exactly what we have, okay? Okay, any questions on this?
Professor, I have a question.
Sure, what's up?
In this case, when we have a person that the vessels in some part has clogged and blocked, the area, the radius, everything changed. That's right.
Correct. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you have a disease, you're going to have a blocked blood vessel. So the radius is going to decrease and the area is going to decrease as well. So we're going to talk about this at length, actually. So, in a couple of weeks, I have a full week plan to just talk about cardiovascular diseases. And so, we're going to talk about what happens when you have plaque that builds up in the vessel wall and how that affects, the fluid mechanics and the biomechanics of the situation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so this expression here is the power required to overcome friction, right? And so that's one of our contributions. And so our other contribution here was the fact that, if you increase the vessel radius, then the amount of power is going to increase just because you have more blood. And so let's write an expression for that. Okay. And so with this, we need to have an expression for the amount of power to move a volume of blood. Okay. All right. And so in other words, you can kind of think of this as the power to overcome inertia. Okay. Okay. Because, like we mentioned, if you increase the amount of radius, or you increase the radius of your blood vessel, you're just going to increase the amount of blood that's there. Okay, so if you have a higher amount of volume, you're going to have a higher amount of inertia. Okay, and so we'll call this W dot inertia. Okay, and just for the purposes of this, I'm not going to go through a lengthy kind of derivation here. So all we're going to assume is that the amount of power is going to be proportional to the volume. Okay. And so what we can say is that we can take some constant B, and so B here is our proportionality constant, and we multiply by the volume of blood in that tube, okay? And so if we plug in the volume, if we compute the volume of a tube, it's going to be pi r squared times L, okay? Okay. And so B, I think the biggest question here is, what is B, right? And so B is just a proportionality constant. And so what we'll see later is that it doesn't really matter what B is because it's going to cancel out, but we just need kind of just a placeholder there, okay? So this is just our proportionality constant. Okay. Right, and so this is consistent with what we said before, where if we increase the radius, the amount of power is going to increase, right? And so if you look at this expression, we have W dot inertia is equal to B times pi r squared times L, okay? And since we have that r squared there, if we increase r, then that's going to increase the amount of power as well, okay? Okay, and so now that we have an expression for W dot viscous and W dot inertia, the total amount of power is just going to be the sum of these two guys. so we'll say W dot total is equal to W dot visc plus W dot inertia. Okay. And then if we take the derivative, or we plug in our expressions here, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, okay? Then we get, let's plug in our expression for viscosity first. So it's going to be 8 mu L over pi r to the 4th times q squared, okay, plus what we have up here, which is b times pi r squared L. Okay. Okay. All right. And so you can see now that we have this, this formula here, okay? And so on the one hand, we have the viscous term, which has r to the 4th on the bottom. And so what that tells us is that, if we decrease the radius, this first term here is going to go up because we have r in the denominator, okay? But if we increase the radius, then we also have an increase the amount of work to overcome inertia, which is encapsulated by that second term, okay? All right. And so remember, our goal here is to we want to minimize this, okay? Okay. And the way that we can minimize this is we can take the derivative of this expression with respect to r and then set it equal to 0. Is remember from calculus, if the derivative of a function is equal to 0, then that means we've either reached a maximum or a minimum. Okay, and so
Tran, what does that say? Is that derivative work?
It's WRT, so that means with respect to.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So question in the chat. So doesn't it lower faster because r to the 4th is in the denominator? Yes. So that's a good point. So these aren't increasing or decreasing at the same rate, but there is still going to be a sweet spot where there's going to be a minimum, and so if we decrease past that minimum, the amount of work is going to shoot up like crazy. But then if we go higher than that minimum, it maybe doesn't increase as quickly. But we're interested in finding where is that minimum. But you're absolutely right, because we have r to the 4th on the bottom. That's going to increase a lot faster once we get past that minimum. Okay. So any other questions on this before I take that derivative? Okay. Okay. And so let's take the derivative of this guy with respect to r, set it equal to 0, and then we're going to solve for r. Okay. So we're going to have dw dot dr, okay, this is going to be equal to, and so the derivative of the first expression will be minus 32 mu L all over pi r to the 5th, okay, q squared, right? So we're going to assume that q here is a constant, okay, plus 2b pi r L. And then we're going to set all this equal to 0 because we want to solve for the minimum. Okay. And so now we're going to solve for r. Okay. And so if we move, this guy over to the other side of the equation, right, then what we get is 2b pi r L is equal to 32 mu L all over pi r to the 5th times q squared. Okay. Now we can start canceling out terms. And so you can see here we have an L and an L. Okay, so those are going to cancel out. Right? And we have a 2 and a 32. And so let's go ahead and move all of the r terms over to one side of the equation. Okay, so let's multiply both sides by r to the 5th to get r on the left side. And then we'll move all the other terms onto the left, onto the right. And so on the left-hand side, we have r to the 6th, okay, because we're going to multiply both sides by r to the 5th, and then we're going to have 16 mu q squared all over pi squared times b Yeah, pi squared b. Okay. And then from here, we can just raise both sides to the 1/6 power. Okay, just to get rid of that exponent of 6. Okay, and so we have r is equal to 16 mu q squared all over pi squared b raised to the 1/6. Okay. Right. And so this right here, this is the optimal radius that we can pick, to minimize the amount of energy. Okay. Okay. So this is nice right here. But actually, in truth, it's not that useful, right? Because remember, we have this b where we didn't really specify what b was. And so we can't really actually compute. We actually can't use this numerically unless we plug in for b. And actually, that b right there can be pretty difficult to get. Okay.
Professor?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
For viscous power, or the amount of power to overcome friction.
Yep.
Is that all over r to the 5th or r to the 4th?
It's r to the 5th. Yeah, because I took the derivative once, and so that turns the r to the 4th to an r to the 5th. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that expression that I have up top there is after taking the derivative once. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this expression that we have for r right here actually isn't that useful in practice because it's we don't know what b is. So we basically need to set up a situation where we can cancel out b. Okay. And so in order to do this, we're going to take this expression right here and actually solve for q. Okay. And I'll show you kind of why in a minute. But basically, we can use conservation of mass at a bifurcation to basically cancel out this b. Okay. And so if we solve for q, we're going to raise both sides to the 6th power. Okay. So we just raise it to the 1/6, but we're going to reverse that for a second. Okay. And then if we manipulate some of the terms around, we get the following equation. So we have q squared is equal to pi squared b all over 16 mu times r to the 6th. Okay. And so if we take the square root, then what we get is q is equal to square root of pi squared b all over 16 mu times r cubed. Okay. And so by taking the square root of r to the 6th, we get r cubed because we're going to divide that exponent by 2. Okay. Okay. And so we'll be able to actually work with this, once we bring this back to our bifurcation here, because it's an expression with flow. Okay. Because I want to kind of highlight this coefficient out in front right here, right? And so let's look at each of the terms in this expression, right? And so first thing we have pi, and so pi is pi. There's it's always going to be pi, right? Next we have b. Remember, b is just a proportionality constant that tells us, how much work is needed or how much power is needed to, move a volume of fluid. Okay. And so b, you can almost say that it's a constant, right? It's a constant. We just don't know what the value is. Okay. Then in the denominator, we have 16 times mu, okay, where mu, remember, is our viscosity, right? And so, we're going to assume that our blood is not going to change its viscosity. And so, in other words, everything in this expression here is a constant. Okay. Right. And so if everything is just a constant there, we can just for mathematical simplicity, we're going to replace it with another constant. Okay. And so let's define a new constant called k and then plug that in there just so that we don't have to keep writing square root of, pi squared b over 16 mu. Okay. And so in other words, what we have is q is equal to kr cubed. And this is the expression that we're going to use, when we bring it back to our bifurcation. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. Okay. And so, it took a lot of work to get here, but we can basically say that Q, or the flow rate in a blood vessel, is equal to some constant times R cubed. Okay. Now let's bring this back to our bifurcation, and let's apply conservation of mass. Okay. So back to the bifurcation. Okay. And so our bifurcation looks like this. Where again, we have the radius of the parent vessel, and we have the radius of the daughter vessels. Okay. Okay. And so this is RD1, this is RD2, okay? And there's also going to be flow coming in here, right? And so we'll call this QP for the flow in the parent vessel. We'll call this QD1 for flow in the first daughter vessel, and we'll call this QD2 for flow in the second daughter vessel, okay? Okay. And so from here, what we can actually do is we can apply conservation of mass. Okay. Because by conservation of mass, we know that mass can't be created or destroyed or accumulated here. And so basically whatever flow that goes into our domain has to come out, okay? And so what we can do is we can say that QP is going to be equal to QD1 plus QD2, okay? Whatever comes in has to come out. Right? So on the left there, we have, the flow that's coming in, which is QP. And on the right, we have all of our outflows, okay? Okay, and so now that we have this expression here, let's go ahead and plug in our expression that we just kind of very painstakingly derived for Q. Okay. Okay. And so QP right here is going to be K RP to the third. Okay. Which is equal to K times RD1 to the third, okay, plus K RD2 cubed, okay? So all I did there was just plugged in our expressions for flow that we just found on the previous page, okay? All right. And so this is great because, now we can take that K that we've kind of been carrying around, and we can just get rid of it because they all cancel out on both sides of this equation. And so what we get from this is the result of Murray's law. Okay. And so Murray's law says that, if you have a vessel that's going to bifurcate or split into two, their radii are related by the following relationship. Okay. And so the radii of the radius of the parent vessel cubed is going to be equal to the sum of the daughter vessel radii cubed as well. Okay. Okay. Right. So it's a deceptively kind of simple result here, that took us kind of a while to get. Right. And so if you remember, the reason we have this relationship here is this is the relationship. This is kind of the most optimal splitting relationship to minimize the amount of work, that the heart has to do. Okay. And so if the radii are related like this, where, you cube the parent radii and you also cube the daughter radii and you add them together. Okay. If you follow this relationship right here, this is going to minimize the amount of work that the heart has to do. Okay. All right. Any questions on this?
Professor,
Mhm.
if we have more than 2 other vessels, we cannot use this equation. That's right.
Actually, for more than 2 vessels, it actually has the same this relationship that follows as well, right? And so let's say we add a third vessel right here, right? And so we have QD3. All you're going to do is you're going to add another QD3 right here, right? Just by conservation of mass. And so the Ks are going to cancel out, just like this, right? And so if you add a third vessel, you just add another radii to the right, because that's just going to be another outflow for that guy. Mhm. Okay. All right, question. So would this apply to the capillary bed with multiple bifurcations? Yeah. So you can keep adding bifurcations to this, and it'll keep following the relationship. Although we will talk a little bit about how real blood vessels actually deviate from this a bit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Joshua, you're actually, you're asking really great questions. So we're going to go over that in a bit. All right, question: can there be more than one RP? So typically there's only one RP, because when a blood vessel splits, that's when we talk about them bifurcating. Because usually when things split, they don't kind of rejoin later on. So we usually just examine one parent vessel at a time, and so there's usually only one RP here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so usually we only consider one input. All right, so question is, can we also simulate active flexing and stretching of blood vessels involved with the software in this class? So I'll answer that kind of later on. But the short answer is that's a really difficult thing to simulate. People have done it, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this class. We're going to need a lot more computing if we want to do that. Yeah. Okay. So this is Murray's law right here. And so this is kind of the most ideal relationship for vessel bifurcating. But in reality, real blood vessels don't follow this exactly. Okay. And the reason it doesn't is because, if you remember, to get here, we had to use a lot of the results from our Navier-Stokes equations, right? And remember, we had to apply a ton of assumptions on our Navier-Stokes. So first of all, actually, what Michael actually just brought up here, one big assumption that we had to make was that our vessel walls were rigid. Okay, so that means that they don't move at all. And so obviously that's not true in the cardiovascular system, because our blood vessels are flexible tubes. Okay, and so because of that, you're going to have some deviations from Murray's law. For just because you have vessel flexibility. Okay. And the other thing is that, because of that flexibility, you're not going to have flow that's completely one directional too. So that was another one of our assumptions. Okay. And so actually, what tends to happen is that for the bigger vessels, the bigger vessels actually tend to deviate more from Murray's law, but the smaller vessels actually follow Murray's law a lot closer, because the smaller vessels tend to be a lot stiffer. And so if we kind of generalize Murray's law to be something like this, so if RP alpha is equal to RD1 alpha plus RD2 alpha, okay? And so instead of an exponent of 3, I've put alpha in there, because alpha, can be any exponent, okay? Generally, what the experiments have measured have been the following, okay? And so if your radii, or your radius, I should say your parent radius, is among the following sizes. And so if we go from 0.2 to 0.5 centimeters, okay, so these are some of the biggest vessels in your body, okay? And so for some of your biggest vessels, your alpha here will range from anywhere between 2.4 to 2.65, okay? Because actually, your bigger vessels tend to flex a lot more, because they're a lot more flexible, just because they're bigger. Okay. Right. And then if you go down a level, so if you go to some of the smaller vessels, which is has a radius of 0.025 to 0.05, okay, then the coefficient tends to be something along the order of 2.65 to 2.9. Okay. or sorry, 2.65 to 2.7. Sorry, can't read my own handwriting. Okay.
What does alpha represent again?
Wait a second.
What is alpha again?
Alpha is the coefficient that's here in the Murray's law.
Okay, so just a coefficient. Okay.
Yeah, or the exponent. Because what we derived was that alpha was 3, right? But in reality, real blood vessels don't have the cubed relationship. So I'm just listing out some of the real values that have been observed and measured in practice. Yeah. So this is centimeters. And so if you go one level down, so these are kind of even smaller blood vessels. And so this is like 0.0005 to 0.025. Okay. This has exponents of 2.75 to 3. Okay. And then if your vessel radius is less than 0.0025 centimeters, or 0.005, then that's when you have your Murray's law of 3. Okay. And so actually, generally for the bigger vessels, they tend to deviate more from Murray's law than the smaller ones because they're flexible. Okay. And your capillaries are around this size down here. So there's a lot of experimental measurements, actually both in humans and also in animals too, that verify this, where they measured kind of the size of the branching capillaries, and they found that the Murray's law is, has an exponent of 3. Okay. Okay. And so one thing I do want to point out is that you should notice that all of these exponents here, whether for the biggest vessels or the smaller ones, all of them are above 2. Okay. And so this is significant because, let's do the case where, where we have an exponent of 2. Okay. And so if we have an exponent of 2, then we have the following relationship. Okay. Right. So we have RP squared is equal to RD1 squared plus RD2 squared. Okay. Let me put in one extra factor in here to kind of make this a bit more clear. And so let me take pi and let me multiply through the entire equation, right? Okay. And so whenever we have pi r squared, we know that this is the cross-sectional area. Right? And so here we have AP is equal to AD1 plus AD2. Okay. Right. And so in other words, if we have an exponent of 2, then our bifurcation will be area preserving, right? So that means the total cross-sectional area of the daughters is going to be equal to, the total cross-sectional area of the parent, okay? But the fact that all of these exponents are above 2 means that every time that we have a bifurcation, the total cross-sectional area of the blood vessels is increasing, okay? Okay. And so every time you have a bifurcation, you can think of it as, we're adding more lanes to the freeway that is our cardiovascular system. Okay. And that's important too, because that helps kind of minimize that work. Okay. So that's another reason why we have Murray's law predicts an exponent of 3, because that's, it helps minimize the work that's done. Okay. Any questions on any of this?
This is vessels increase at bifurcations, right?
Yeah. Or the total cross-sectional area of the blood vessels, those increase at the bifurcations. Yeah.
Okay, so that line right there doesn't mean like divided by.
Oh no. I'm just I'm emphasizing increase.
Oh yeah, that was a stupid question.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
It's okay. Yeah, well, I know my handwriting can be kind of going weird sometimes. Yeah. Okay, so that's Murray's law, right? And so one more point that I want to make from today's lecture is I want to talk about wall shear stress again. Okay, so we talked about wall shear stress a little bit last week, but just to kind of remind you, the wall shear stress is the viscous shear stress that the fluid imparts on the vessel wall. Okay. And so the way that we computed it was with this formula right here. And so tau W here, that's our wall shear stress, is equal to mu times duz dr, okay? And so we just take our velocity distribution uz, which is what we found from Navier-Stokes, and then we just take the derivative with respect to r, and then we set that equal to big R, okay? Because we're evaluating this at the wall, okay? All right. And so if you plug in our expression for u, so let's say that you take the derivative, you end up with the following expression. Okay. And so you get tau W is equal to mu times, oh no mu, sorry, look at the wrong line. So we have big R over 2 times dp dz. Okay. All right. So this is fine right here, but we would like to put this in terms of Q, because when things are in terms of Q, it allows us to apply conservation of mass. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're going to plug in for this for the pressure gradient to put this in terms of Q. Okay. And so if you remember, this was the very first equation that we started with today. So that's kind of why I reminded you of that. Okay. And so just to kind of refresh your memory, so we have Q is equal to minus pi r to the 4th over 8 mu times dp dz. Okay. And so if we solve for dp dz and then plug that in, okay, we end up with the following expression for tau w. Okay. And so tau w is going to be minus 4 mu q all over pi r cubed. Okay. And so usually in these cases, we're just going to ignore the negative, and so we're just going to pretend that it's not there. Or another way you can think about it is we're taking the magnitude of this wall shear stress. Okay. And so our formula for the wall shear stress for a cylindrical vessel in terms of Q and R is going to be 4 times Q times mu divided by pi r cubed. Okay. Okay. All right. And so I know I skipped some steps in that derivation right there. So if you want to kind of see the full work, you can see it in the notes. But I think we've had enough of substituting and manipulating algebra. So I'll leave it at that. Okay. All right. And so this expression for wall shear stress, maybe it's setting off some alarm bells for you, because you can see we have an r cubed on the bottom, right? And so what does r cubed remind us of? So r cubed reminds us of Murray's law, right? Okay. And so let's actually apply this at a bifurcation, and let's say that let's see if we can find something or find a relationship between wall shear stress in a parent vessel and its daughter vessel. Okay. All right. Any questions on this before I jump to that? So we want to find the relationship between wall shear stress, or WSS, in parent and daughter vessels. Okay. All right. And so for this, you know, let's assume for now that both the daughter vessels have the same radius. Okay. And so, you know, we're gonna be making that assumption for this just to make the calculations easier. But this applies for all daughter vessels, you know, and so, you know, it's a simplification for this for now, but the result is general. Okay. Okay. And so both daughters have the same radius. Then if we apply conservation of mass, okay, then we have QP is equal to QD plus QD. Okay, because if both have the same radius, then they're going to have the same amount of flow that goes to them. Okay, and so we have QP is equal to Q2 QD. Okay. Right. And so that's conservation of mass. And we can also write an expression for Murray's law. Okay. So Murray's law states that RP cubed is equal to RD cubed plus RD cubed. Okay. And if both of these are the same, we can have RP cubed is equal to 2RD cubed. Okay. All right. And so now let's take these and let's compute the wall shear stress in both the parent and the daughter artery. Okay. Okay. And so let's actually do the daughter one first. And so if we use the formula on the previous page, we know that tau W is going to be equal to 4 times mu times Q, where the Q in the daughter vessel is going to be QD, all divided by pi RD cubed. Okay. Right. And so now let's do the wall shear stress in the parent artery. So in the parent artery, we have tau W is equal to 4 mu QD, or QP, sorry, divided by pi RP cubed. Okay. Right. But let's take this and let's plug in for QP and RP. Okay. And so if we plug in for both of those guys, we have 4 mu. QP is nothing more than Q2QD. Okay. And then on the bottom, we have pi. RP cubed is nothing more than 2 RD cubed. Okay. We can see that we have 2 that cancels out on the top and the bottom. And we see that 4 mu QD times pi RD cubed. Okay. Right. And you can see from these two that they're the same. Right. So this is actually kind of a really crazy result. And so what this tells you is that, you know, when a vessel bifurcates and it follows Murray's law, then the amount of shear stress or the amount of friction that is felt between the parent and the daughters are exactly the same, right? And so this is another consequence of Murray's law, so that, you know, whenever a vessel bifurcates, you know, the size of the daughter vessel is chosen such that the wall shear stress matches the same as the parent. Okay. So if you think about it, that's kind of really crazy, right? That the fact that we have something here that's wall shear stress, and your blood vessels kind of naturally pick a radius to kind of make sure that this wall shear stress is always the same. All right. Any questions on this before we kind of wrap it up? Okay. All right. So let me draw just kind of one picture just to kind of show you how kind of crazy this is. So, if I draw kind of a really big kind of bifurcating tree, and so let's say that we have one parent here. And we draw both its daughter and its grandkids as well, okay? Let's say it's going to have some great grandkids, okay? Okay. And so if you have some kind of crazy bifurcating tree like this, which is pretty common, something like this, happens all the time in the cardiovascular system, then the wall shear stress, according to our calculations, should be the same here at the parent, obviously. It should be the same in a granddaughter vessel. It should be the same in the great granddaughter vessel, right? And so everywhere, the wall shear stress is going to be roughly the same, okay? And so no matter how many generations that you do, you're going to end up with the same wall shear stress, okay? So biologically, this actually makes a lot of sense because remember, on the insides of your vessel wall, it's actually lined with living cells, right? So we call that the endothelial cells or the endothelium, okay? And these endothelial cells, they can sense the amount of friction force that's being applied on, right? And so, since we have the same endothelial cells that line the parent vessel and all the daughter ones, it makes sense that they want to experience kind of the same kind of stress, right? Because it's not really fair if if the parent vessel endothelial cells have to experience much more shear stress than the daughter, right? And so because they have the same cells, it makes sense that they want to experience the same kind of fluid mechanical environment. Okay. All right. Any questions on any of this? Okay. All right, so we have less time than I thought that we would have, but I do want to show you at least where to download it. But I think what I'll do over the weekend is I'll prepare a document and I'll prepare a video to kind of show you how to download Viscosity because because it is a little bit involved, but I'll kind of overview the process now. Okay, and so let me go ahead and share my laptop screen. Okay. Okay. And so where you're going to download Viscosity is you're going to go to the website www.simvascular.org. Okay. And I'll make an announcement about this too, so you don't have to kind of write this down. And so when you go to that website, you're going to end up over here. Okay. All right. And so this is kind of the landing site for this research software. Okay. And if you kind of read just the catchphrase for Viscosity, it's a fully open source software. And if you aren't familiar with the term open source, that means it's free, which is great. Free is always good. Okay? And this package provides a complete pipeline from medical image data to segmentation to patient-specific blood flow simulation and analysis. Okay, and that's going to be what we're going to do. It's not going to give you a virus. I've downloaded this software dozens and dozens of times, so it's fine. Okay. And so just to kind of give you a preview of what you're going to do, you're going to create like a geometry that looks like these in these pictures. Okay. And so, each of you is going to have a set of medical image data. So that's going to come from a real person. So it's a CT scan that was taking place on a real person. You're going to construct their geometry. Okay. So you're going to take those medical images and construct their, 3D geometry. And then you're going to run a CFD simulation on it. Okay. And so it's going to look something like this. Okay, so you're going to have blood that comes in and it's going to flow through your system. It's going to have all these really kind of cool and complex flow patterns. It's going to exit out. Okay. And then from the simulation, you'll be able to, do all kinds of analysis, based on a lot of the concepts that we're going to learn in the class. Okay. So I've already secured the computing. So, we already have supercomputing access for this. And so, it's just going to be a matter of, using the software and running the simulation. That means I have dozens and dozens of viruses. maybe. I do get calls every day about, my social security number being canceled by the government, and that I should call them and provide my social security number because it's, obviously, they need it to verify that my social security number is being canceled. So, maybe that's it. Okay. Yeah. So actually afterwards, you'll be able to make animated videos like this too. So, we're going to go through, we're going to go through all steps of the process of, running a simulation, analyzing it, and creating animation like this. So, so it's going to be a lot of work, and that's why, I want to talk about this now so that, you guys can get started soon, because it's going to be quite the process throughout this entire semester. Yeah. Okay. And so how do you actually download this? Okay. So, if you go on this website, you can see that there's several tabs up here. So we're viewing the gallery. So you can view, if you want to view different videos here, you can do that. So they're all really cool. And so, so Michael, here's actually one where, the walls actually move. And so you can kind of see the walls that are pulsing. Okay. But to actually download the software, you need to click on download right here. Okay. And so when you click download, you're going to go down to this link right here. Okay. And the one that you want to the link that you want to click here is you want to download this installation package. Okay. And so when you click that, it's going to take you to a different website called SimTK. Right? Okay. Yeah. Video tutorial. I think I'll do that over the weekend so that just so that we kind of walk you through this process. Yeah. We're not going to do it until Thursday. So, you guys have until next Thursday to download this, but I'll record a video over the weekend to kind of show you guys this process. Okay. And so once you come to this downloads page, you'll see some links here. Okay. And then what you want to download here is the most recent release. Okay. And so luckily for us, there was a big update recently, and this hopefully fixed a lot of the bugs, because my research students have kind of been suffering because of some of the bugs, but I think they fixed a lot of them. Okay. And you want to click down here and you want to click your download links. Okay. And so you can see here that there's, several links here. Okay. And you want to click the one for your operating system. Okay. And so you can see here we have two downloads for Linux. Okay. And one download for Mac. And so if you have a Mac, you can click this one. And I guess the Windows version didn't update. So if you're running Windows, you want to download one of the previous releases. Okay. And so the previous release, let's see, let's go here. And so this will be from April 2020. And so I think that's the most recent one. And you want to download the .exe. Okay. Yeah. So I'll make a video tutorial about this just because there's kind of a lot. So you get your blood vessels. So I'll give everyone their medical image data after the tutorial next week. Okay. So sometime next week, I'm going to send out, I need to look at what medical images I have available to me, and then I'll let you guys sign up for the particular image that you want to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Question. So how do you cite something like this for research? So we've written papers about it. And so, if you write a paper or if you do a research project that uses SimFastWare, all you have to do is kind of use, reference this paper, put this paper in your bibliography or in your references. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And so if you try to download it right away, you'll probably see that you won't be able to. So actually, let me try to download this one. Okay. And you'll see that, it's going to ask you to make an account. So I know, it's we're in account overload. So, but this is mostly so that, we can track, everyone or how many downloads that we've had, because the reason this software is free is because it's funded by NSF, which is a government agency. And so we basically need to show NSF that people are actually downloading this and using it for their research. Okay. And so that's the only reason you need to make an account. And so, so let me go ahead and log in with my account here. Okay. And then after you log in and you create an account, it's going to ask you to describe how you're going to use this software. So you can just give some dummy reason here. So you don't have to say anything particular. So you can say taking a class. Okay. And then after that, it's going to let you download. Okay. So then you click download. And then that's going to download an .exe that you can click, and that will launch the installation package. Okay. All right. And so I'll create a video over the weekend to kind of show this process again, just to kind of go through start to finish. And so I will say that I have a Windows system, so I'll show you how it works for Windows. But if you have a Mac, it's very similar. So the only thing that you change at the end is how you install it, okay? And so, if everyone can have some vascular downloaded and installed before next Thursday, then you're going to be good to go for first workshop, okay? Okay. So any final questions on any of this? All right. Cool. Yeah, should be a lot of fun. All right. So thank you guys for tuning in today. It's a long weekend, so definitely enjoy yourselves on Monday. Since Monday's a day off, but I will be having office hours on Monday. So if you want to stop by 9 to 10 on Monday, if you have a question or anything, I will be there. But otherwise, Monday's a holiday. Okay. So have a great long weekend, everyone. I'll see you on Tuesday. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Professor, I had a quick question about heat transfer.
Sure. What's up?
Could I just send you an email in a bit about having office hours tomorrow again? That's
Oh
fine.
yeah. That's so I'm pretty busy in the mornings on Friday because that's when I meet with all my graduate students. But after 1 o'clock, I should be free.
Okay, cool. I'll send you an email just as a reminder in a couple minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Professor, I have a short question.
Sure.
You calculate the radius, and you said that is the optimum radius to minimize the power.
Mhm.
Is it right?
Yeah. So if the radii are selected based on that relationship, then the amount of power that the heart does to pump the blood is minimized.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Bye.
Professor, can you hear me?
Yep. What's up?
I have a question on the wall shear stress.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You said that the wall shear stress is equivalent in the parent and the daughters and so forth, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You said that basically that biologically our body favors a value of the shear stress, right, throughout the blood vessel.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if you know about aneurysms. Is that due to high amount of wall shear stress?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question, and we'll talk about this a lot more once we get into cardiovascular diseases. But aneurysms are actually one of the great mysteries out there right now. So it's really interesting because there's like two crowds of people in the aneurysm community. So there's one crowd of people that think high wall shear stress causes aneurysms, but then there's also a crowd of people that say low wall shear stress causes aneurysms, and they both have evidence that supports their claims, but none of their evidence is particularly compelling. So it's like they're both kind of fighting. And so right now we actually don't know, what really causes aneurysms in terms of the wall shear stress. So, or even if wall shear stress is important for aneurysms to begin with. So yeah, it's one of the great mysteries out there still.
And so the wall shear stress it varies upon the different bodies, right?
Yeah.
Like different people who have different body types.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks, Professor.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Stephen, did you have any other questions? Okay. So if you don't have any other questions, then I'll see you on Tuesday. So have a good weekend.